Welcome. My name is Matt, aka Road Jedi 88. We're getting into Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, mods, Poe Dameron. And this is a sequel trilogy character, and I think at this point I have made my strong opinions well known about how I feel about Star Wars. Or Disney Star Wars, that is. Especially when it comes to the sequel trilogy, the Book of Boba Fett, anything that most of their work that has been post Return of the Jedi. Now they've done pretty good with the pre and New Hope storylines. It's been the post Return of the Jedi that they have royally screwed up. If you were coming from my generation of Star Wars, as I'll point out again, I was introduced to Star Wars as a kid back in the 1990s by my dad, who was introduced to Star Wars in its original form, when it first came out in the 70s. Excuse me. To this day, I still have the VHS trilogy set of the original Star Wars that my dad passed on to me. Without the special edition, all that stuff. And back then, back in the George Lucas era generation of Star Wars, yes, we had the movies. Yes, we had some games. But most of the story was always in the books. And where Disney royally screwed up with the sequel trilogy can be seen largely in the book series of Young Jedi Knight, where you they allow us to get to know about Luke actually training Jedi younglings. Now the planetary system Disney suggests was never on that list. Yavin was, Coruscant was, but wherever the heck they sent Luke off to be a hermit at and supposedly have trained at, that's never mentioned in the book, any of these books. With that includes the Solo kids. Solo twins, the oldest twins were Jason and Jaden Solo. The youngest brother was Anakin Solo. There was never a Ben Solo anywhere. Now, Luke does end up converting a Sith woman. I believe that's going to be her right there in that picture. Mara Jade, who he converted to the Jedi, to the light side, marries her. And at some point in the New Jedi Order, while she struggled with childbearing, but eventually she does end up with a child. And they named him out of his younger childhood nostalgia of old Ben. They named his son Ben Skywalker. That is the only Ben in the family, and it would have been his son. So, I mean, kind of twisted to think that Ben Solo technically should have been Ben Skywalker, that he would have been about to strike down in that Last Jedi episode. Additionally, he does end up with a lot of students. He even takes on a young Tusken youngling girl. He takes on another kid out of Bespin, who grew up on the surface of Bespin, which is a toxic planetary system, which is why Orlando has to have the Cloud City for fresh air, you know. And I mean, he takes on a lot of students. He basically rebuilds the Jedi Academy all over again. Another one of his students was Chewbacca's nephew named Lubaka. It is also because, honestly, speaking on behalf, if I'm allowed to, my generation of Star Wars, who followed these books that Kathleen Kennedy claimed there was no fan base of. Surprised she ended up with a fan war on her hands. She still didn't notice that was coming from the fan base she said didn't exist. My recommendation to Disney is to scrap their sequel trilogy as well as Book of Boba Fett. Accept the loss. My generation was going to call you out, and we're not buying the legend canon excuse that y'all came up with conveniently after your mistake with Force Awakening, and we called you out on it. And your episode 10 that y'all wanted to name New Jedi Order, that wasn't very clear, but that again, every time the George Lucas generation fans who follow the books have called Disney out, they come on something, they come up with a new way to try to cover their mistake. Every single time. This is something Paramount would never do to their Star Trek fans. Let me point that out. And whenever they signed to take on Star Trek, they made sure to include the original fan base. They didn't act like they did not exist. It may have been kind of a foggy fan base to a lot of other eyes, but they were there. And I would imagine if Star Trek, if Paramount had done the same with Star Trek, the way Disney's done with Star Wars, they'd have a fan war like this. Luckily for them, their fan war is who's the better captain. Captain Kirk, Captain Picard, Captain Archer. You know, that's their fan war. This one is all, I mean, this is largely my generation of fans going off on the Disney producers for not having their screenwriters know how to read a book before they screenwrite, let alone whenever they set their contract agreement or even acknowledging that there was a fandom from the George Lucas era. I mean, it was only successful for them to be able to take on because there was a fandom in the first place. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a franchise for them to have signed over to them. If we didn't exist, they only got to have the franchise in their hands because we did exist. But their episode 10, don't even come out with it. Don't even title it New Jedi Order because that's them duct taping another excuse, another cover up, because they know that their sequel trilogy messed up from this book series right here. We are all for seeing more films made. Hell, we've been begging. I mean, I know since I was a kid, I would make comments out to the Star Wars fan base or whatever. Whatever. I've been a part of, like, kind of the Star Wars mail order stuff as a kid. That little childhood experience there. But I know there were moments where if I ever entered into a chat situation, I was one of the many that would say, hey, we need Shadows of the Empire. Disney had no problem. I mean, they know my generation has been begging for Shadows of the Empire. They kind of teased us with Andor and Rogue One for A New Hope. Shadows of the Empire would do the same for Return of the Jedi. It would also save a lot of rhetorical questions that are constantly being asked in Return of the Jedi if they did do it. It would answer a lot of questions. It would do for Return of the Jedi the way Andor did for Rogue One, the way Rogue One did for A New Hope. It literally would. So we're not against a sequel trilogy, but follow the books. Paramount can do it for Star Trek. They took the original fandom into consideration before they signed for Star Trek. There's no reason why Disney should have been able to do the same, especially out of appreciation for the fact that there was a franchise they were even being given a chance to get to take on. Otherwise, without the fans, there would be no franchise. The New Jedi Order. Chewbacca was killed in the second book, sacrificing his life, which puts Han on a total grief situation, which is kind of what led him to separating from Leia. I mean, he just goes into total, like, if you want to call it, emo gothic grief situation. I mean, he even went so far as to paint the Millennium Falcon black in one of the books. And, I mean, they try to work stuff out. It's not the Imperial remnants that they are dealing with. Now, there were elements of Imperial remnants they're still dealing with in the Young Jedi Knights. It's like just a sliver of them. But the galaxy starts being invaded by an outside galaxy source known as the Yuuzhan Vongs, which is actually where Disney, whatever they're doing with Ahsoka Season 2, and wherever they're going with the Mandalorian and Grogu series, they really need to be careful in terms of, for my generation, what we're going to be... Okay, there's a fan war. And what was it? Kathleen Kennedy, or one of the producers, claimed that there was no fan base for Star Wars before Disney. Where do you think the fan war came from? There's only a fan war because they acted like we didn't exist. We're fan warring because we do exist. And like I said, the majority of the books, or majority of the story, was always in the books first. Usually the movie, the books would kind of circle around, they would navigate around George Lucas's movies. And then the games would kind of work around the books. That was usually the order out of my generation, how a lot of this would work. Nowadays, Disney's got it all, movies and cinematic and games. And for a company that claims they promote education, they completely leave out the books, especially the ones from my generation, where there was a fandom. Hence the fan war. But yeah, there is a number of things that Disney did not take into account with the sequel trilogy. Never once do I recall reading about a Poe Dameron. So I don't know where he came from, but that is definitely a very, very much a Disney made-up character. You will not read about him anywhere in any of these books. Now I understand that they, there was contract agreements made whenever George Lucas was signing over, but I have to point out, when Star Trek, or when Paramount, took on Star Trek, they still maintained Gene Roddenberry's work, or any of the works that was done under his name, and they still kind of maintained a sense of call me being a little abrupt on this one, or a little rough on this opinion, but I feel like Paramount, before they did the reboot, they still maintained a relative sense of respect to the original fandom that was there whenever they went on with their Star Trek work. And yes, I am a bit of a Star Trek fan. I'm not only a Star Wars fan. As I pointed out, I'm not religious to Star Wars, but I am passionate to it. It made a huge impact to me in my childhood years. It still has an impact to me to this day. I would also point out, too, for Disney, who says they promote education but completely leave out books, they talk about how they press for imagination. I am a published book author, and if there's anything I do know about books, is books push for imagination. It challenges the mind to imaginate. So why Disney would completely skew away from the books, completely not even promote these books, is very contradictory to their mission or their statements. And George Lucas's books were all about imagination, along with many other things, but one of the biggest things in this book was largely imagination. And yes, I am a bit of a Star Trek fan. I'm not only a Star Wars fan. As I pointed out, I'm not religious to Star Wars, but I am passionate to it. It made a huge impact to me in my childhood years. It still has an impact to me to this day. That's just Star Wars. And a lot of it was largely what George Lucas would imply in the messages of his stories. I think that's a lot of what I gravitated to, largely. But here we are working on Poe Dameron. If you go to my first video in my mods playlist, I explain the various different types of character roles by definition, as well as the various different types of mods and their purpose. So swgoh.gg recommended the same as the in-game tips, which is speed and potency. Poe Dameron is a tank character. By definition, a tank is not the vehicle you drive around in, or the military vehicle. It is actually, it is, but it's what it's doing. It's protecting the people that is inside. That's what it is. If you have a fish, you keep your fish in a fish tank, right? It's holding the water together and keeping your fish safe. In Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, in this case, A tank character is a character role whose focus is going to be on protecting the squad members inside the squad. In some cases, they'll kind of do taunts and stand in between the squad and the enemies as if they're standing up to a bully. I mean, come on, there are opponents trying to pick a fight with us. I'm just kidding. Excuse me. So tank. I mean, yeah, another aspect, yeah, because it is generally going to be heavy in its feature for its design purpose of what it's supposed to do. It can have a mean punch. It can also be a little slow in its movement too, because of whatever it's weighing it down to for its ability to protect. So if we look at these various different abilities, I am seeing aspects that also suggest damage, which critical damage is another mod. When we do the modding, and I'm seeing potency there, and health, so there's probably a number of things that can actually be done with Poe Dameron. Potency is not a bad idea. Speed allows them to move a little bit quicker. Like I said, generally whatever the material or source that is required for the tank to serve its purpose, usually it's gonna weigh it down just a little bit. So that with more weight means it's gonna be a little slow. It's still gonna be durable, it's strong in its design. It is gonna hit hard. It's just not gonna be quick on its feet. So you put a little more speed, well, now he can actually be a tank, but like an attacker tank. Like an attacker character role, because attackers generally are going to move a little bit quicker. That potency is going to make him more dominant in his attacks. Now, if you want him just pure tank, you can consider maybe tenacity. Tenacity, by definition, means not easily torn apart. I saw elements about offense as well as taunting. So tenacity, yeah, if he's drawing all the attention to himself with that taunt, that means he's going to be getting picked on quite a bit by the opponents. So a little tenacity might give him a little leeway to hold his ground a little longer, hopefully. Defense could take into consideration, but if nothing else, if you wanted to trade the potency out, you could probably go to critical. Well, no, because I saw stuff in the abilities about damage, not chance. So, really, in hindsight, it would be actually trading out the speed for critical damage and keep the potency. That is an approach you could take if you wanted to have him like an attacker type tank still. I don't really see much in terms of being able to cross-train him to be like a support tank in any form. More or less, either just staying as a tank or attacker tank. If you wanted to cross-train him in a way, outside of just only being a tank. Which is essentially what we're kind of doing already with the speed and potency. We're basically just kind of cross-training him to be able to have attacker role abilities and still function as a tank. So, at the top of my head, that's probably about the best I can come up with for Poe Dameron in terms of mods. This is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, comments, questions, suggestions down below, and thank you for following. May the Force be with you.